Hello and welcome back to another RTK video. I'm your host, Opalbearblack, and today we're doing a tier list of all of Slaanesh's units following their DLC. If you like our content, please like it, and maybe even subscribe. And if you want to argue with my opinions here, you can do that either in the comments or join our Discord, where you can also get access to coaching and build advice from some of the best players in the world. So let's start defining our tiers. S tier is basically auto take. Any matchup, you'll take this and it will do well for you. A tier, bit more situational, but where you take it, it will excel, and it will do that in most matchups. B tier, this is more niche tech, there might be some reasons for it, it might just be overshadowed by a unit but still be quite good. C tier, this is not the most optimal choice, still make it work if you really want to, but you're always better taking a higher tier unit. And D tier, you should just not take these, it's not like playing around them, they're actively bad and probably hurt you playing the game. So before we can define lords and heroes, we first got to define laws and magic. So, you've got two laws on Slaanesh, Shadows, and Slaanesh. Now, the benefits of Shadows, you have Enfeebling Foe, which is a very good debuff, Melkoff, which is amazing to cav as a slow and damage tool, you've got Pendulum, which is good for clearing archers, and you've got Pit of Shades, which is quite expensive but can kill elite infantry. Then you've got Slaanesh. You have Purveyne, which is a good rampage spell, not as useful as it once was, Phantasmagoria, which is a big net. It has to be cast on the floor low with a long wind-up time, so it's not brilliant, but it does have a leadership debuff. Slicing Shards, big AoE damage spell, not very efficient because it's just such a long wind-up. Then you've got Acquiescence, which is a debuff. Now, the lore passives are fine for both. Slaanesh is probably better because it gives you a melee attack buff to your whole army. I always prefer Shadows because it is more all-round universal, because since Purveyne got nerfed, good players are able to dodge it quite efficiently, and you often don't get as much value from it as you do from just spamming Melkoffs on cav, use it to catch other opponent cavs, and debuff their cav in their cav fights, because it really helps you win those mobility fights efficiently. So for my opinion, Shadows casters are always going to be higher, but that's very much a personal opinion. So when taking casters, unless it's drastically offensive to what they do, they'll probably be the same as their adjacent caster. Now, moving on to our lords. Let's start with the legendary lords, and we'll start first with Sigvold. So, Sigvold for me is an A tier unit. He is good in most matchups, primarily because he just doesn't die. He'll stay, grind, fight in melee, and that's all you need sometimes, especially in someone like Wood Elves, which is type your lord. That's my favourite example for using him. He'll go punch enemy casters and stuff, but he's not going to be killing masses of stuff, and you don't want to send him into large SEs. But he does his job well, and is always reliable. T'Challa. The issue for her is cost. For 2,400 for all her items, and her items are really good, you're only 200 or 300 off a Keeper of Secrets. And that means you're paying an extra 500 gold because you then have to have a caster and T'Challa. And for me, that is just expensive. She's efficient and not like that bad, but when I play Slash, I find she can often make your builds quite tall for not massive value. You're not going to get 3k or 4k from her, but across it, she's making you pay. And for me, that means she's just a B tier lord. Not bad, you can take her, but in my opinion, not the most optimal. Now on to Mask. This might be the big controversial one. She's A tier, and that's because she is still a squishy foot character, which means when people tech into her by bringing spirit leeches, big SEs, she's very vulnerable. And there is that counterplay that means she just dies. She dies a lot, and people do tech into her. So for that reason, I don't think she's an auto-take in every matchup. She's good in lots of them, but you do have to be careful of where you use her, because she can die, and that is a weakness. On to Azazel. He can die as well, but he's a lot quicker, and I don't particularly like him for his costs, because you're paying for a melee character that isn't that good in melee, because he still dies to lots of stuff, being very squishy. And you're paying for a caster, but the melee character as well. So you're paying 2k for him, which is just too much gold in my opinion. But he's a caster, so he's not that bad. So he's B tier. Then we've got the Heralds. I think for me, all these sorcerers, they're all good. You can take them in basically any matchup. I'm going to put the Heralds slightly below because they are a lot squishier than foot mortal characters, which means you do have to be slightly more careful about if the enemy has sniping tools, etc. But I mean, all four solid lords. You can never go wrong with a cheap caster. On to N'Kari now. He is a Keeper of Secrets, which means he is squishy, which means you do have to pick his matchups. But he has a really good heal, so lots of melee matchups. If he can get isolated fights, he won't take much damage and still be very healthy at the end of the game. And that survivability is very valuable. He also hits hard. He is a spellcaster. He is quite expensive, but I like the fact that he does damage consistently. For that, he's an A tier lord. I take him to lots of matchups like Counts, where they can't punish him with shooting, and there he can really dominate the game. Now on to the Demon Prince of Slaanesh. The issue I have for him is he's expensive as a keeper, but he's slow, which means he can be punished quite easily. His animations aren't great, so he doesn't often connect and kill stuff, and he does have very interesting lore of magic, but it isn't enough to convince me, wow, I want to take this guy, because Slaanesh and Shadows are both very good on their own. You don't really need to mix them. So that, he's a C tier unit. He's not the most optimal, but he's still solid. On to the keepers. I think both of these are B tier, They have their niche matchups where they're very good, but would I take Nakari most of the time? Yes. Would I take the mask and a character with caster? Probably. You have to pick their moments, and for me, with the mask and Nakari, I would take those two over them. That's a personal choice. I know some people make them work, and Tisty's made them work very well. But for me, they're not the most optimal in most cases, so I'm much rather have either cheap or some other melee combination. Striker. Now, he did take a nerf. For me, he's still very good. He's the best character. He's great at hunting characters down, especially in matchups like Tomb Kings where you want to hunt SEs. He's good at breaking up blob fights with his massive melee debuff. And he's a really good support for having a caster where he's able to jump and defend them. So he's an A tier choice still. The Cultist, it's quite unsynergistic this one, because you want to be fighting in melee, but then you're also very squishy in melee. So you often die before you get your cast off, or just take ridiculous amounts of damage so you can't get the value of someone like a Khorne or Nurgle one. So this is a C tier character for me. I just don't see the use. Summons are still good, which is why it's still C tier, but otherwise, pretty meh. All the casters are just going to be plopped straight into A tier. You're going to take a caster in basically every matchup. Well, that's not a caster. And you can't go wrong. Do you want speed or a bit more durability? So that's what you pick between. But other than that, very equivalent. Pick your poison. Then we go on to the heroes. Oh, we still got the Chaos Lord. I missed him. Well, he is, in my opinion, a C tier Lord. He's not actively bad. But just I wouldn't take him in a matchup because you can take the Mask a similar price. Or Sigfold. Or Striker and a Lord. And that's the really thing. He's just overshadowed on a strong roster. But he's not bad. He's not actively hurting you. However, the Druki Anointed. This guy, for what you're paying, you have to pay for the spells, which feels really annoying. And they're really overcosted, in my opinion. And he's just not that impactful. I think you're better with other units. And I think he hurts you because he's wasting funds. I haven't used this guy massively, the champion, but I just don't think he's that good. He's just a lot of points for where you can have Sigfold, Mask again. Very similar, but he's so cost inefficient compared to the other options. He actively hurts you over not bringing them. And now we're moving on to the rest of the units. So let's start with the Marauders. All of these, they're all ITP, which is amazing for cheap infantry. It makes them incredibly hard to clear. We've seen how good Bearmen are. And what I'd say is, I think the whips are just slightly expensive for what you get. But the other two, they're cheap, they do their job well, and they don't run away. Solid A tier units. Slangors, S tier, they blend in melee, they're so quick, they have Vanguard deployment, they act as basically light cav, but being infantry, they're amazing. They make every one of my builds, you have 2 of them in reserve at least, if not more. Awesome unit. Devoted Spear, I struggle for the cost. You're stuck between Slangors and Forsaken and Hellstriders. But often for a slightly slower static piece, it doesn't really fit my game plan. They're not actively bad, I just think they just have a lot of competition, so I wouldn't see them much. So probably ending up more in this B tier area. Well, they're not bad, but you're not really taking them. Forsaken, for me this is an S tier unit. This is the fundamental infantry of all Slaanesh builds at the moment. If you're unsure, you go Forsaken and you can put melee pressure on incredibly quickly. Being so quick, they go really well with all the cav and the monsters, and I think they're clearly away the best infantry to play Slaanesh's fast aggressive style. Demonettes, these guys suffer from just being squishy, and I think they're really a C tier unit because they get massively overshadowed by these two for killing infantry. And if you want the armor piercing, you have Fiends, you have Exalted Demonettes, you've got Pleasure Seekers, you've got Seekers, you've got Furies. We're just in a world of armor piercing. There are a lot of gold for not much killingness. Now the Chaos Warrior, you can still armor check people very well. I think it's more useful than both of the expensive Marauders. But armor checking is not really what I want to be doing in Slaanesh. I think it's still good, but am I taking them in lots of matchups? Not really. Moving to Devotees, they suffer very similarly to the Demonettes. I played them a couple games and they've got me okay value. They never blow me out of the water. They just are expensive. And you've got Slangors, which are just 275 gold cheaper. So good that it doesn't really matter what the Devotees do because it's almost impossible for them to overshadow it for being more expensive. Onto the Whip Warriors. I think these are probably a C tier unit. They're just quite expensive. 150 gold's a lot for an extra bit of melee defense and stats. It's not amazing. If I was taking all, I'd go Chaos Warriors first to actually make it wide enough, and then I'd probably go Marauders just to keep the width going. And you're not far away from Chosen then at this point. It's really hard sell to say I'm going to buy a Whip Warrior instead of a Chosen. Another struggler because of this is the Mirror Guard. They just fall in the same role. Quite expensive. Would you rather have it Chosen? Would you rather have the extra width? Hard to justify. Now on to the Chosen. I think they're both B tier. I've made lots of matchups work with them. I can paint them into green skins, is one that I love them in. And there are lots of matchups where you can catch off guard by just running 5 Chosen at them. Is it always the best? No. But is it a strategy that Slaanesh can execute well? I think it is. I think there is a difference in that level between the whips and them. But you can go no armor and just rush them. Slight armor wall or you go very elite infantry. And I think the elite infantry style is still good, which is why they're B tier unit. Exalted Demonettes, I think these are situational, but very good. I put these in a similar role that I often have one in every build. On most matchups, not every build, but they still, in those matchups, they're good. They hit really hard. They solve a job often of breaking apart some static infantry in the late game. I would never really start them because they are incredibly squishy and fragile. But when they connect, and for that, they do what I want them to do. Now onto the crossbows. They're fine. I don't think they massively suit what Slaanesh is trying to do lots of the time. Are they actively a bad unit? Not really. They're probably a bit overcosted. But can you make them work if you tried? Yeah, I would put them as a CT unit. I don't think they are following Slaanesh's playstyle of playing aggressively and on the front foot particularly well. But I haven't massively tried to use them to make it work, so I can't really say. Now onto the horsemen. We'll jump both these together because you often run as a package. You would always take the ROR. The ROR is amazing, but you always want to take a couple horsemen with it. For that, if you want to play kite, these are your kite tools. They're good, they do the job of kite tools, and you can't complain. Now on to Hellstriders. This unit is so good as light cav. For 675, they blend. They're in every one of my builds. You always have 2 to 3 of them, and they trade well. And you can never go wrong just having some cheap Moby. I think the whip ones, they are a bit more expensive, but they serve a different purpose, and they do follow up quite nicely because you often need more than 3 light cav pieces. So I would say they're probably following up in A tier. I would always go for the cheaper one first, because I liked having that extra time to get them out of summon pool and the anti-large. But the whips I could see an argument for being an A tier as well. On to Seekers. In my opinion, this is an A tier unit. You're going to want one of these in lots of matchups just to be a big hammer. It is still very fragile, so it probably does end up in this role of a Hellstrider, is that you can spam out the Hellstriders, but the whip ones and the Seekers are a bit more situational. You've got to be quite careful where you use the Seekers, because they are, as we said, very fragile. Now, Heart Seekers, I think, struggle a bit because they've just got better competition. Are they a bad unit? No. Do they hit incredibly hard? Yes. And for that, you can still take them. My issue is you'd either, if I'm spending 1400, so 400 more than a Seeker, I often just want to upgrade to a Pleasure Seeker or the ROR. And that's the issue for me, is they just get overshadowed slightly. So probably end up more in C tier because they've just got better alternatives. On to Sword and Board Chaos Knights. Are they bad? Not really. They're fine. They're Chaos Knights. They've got good armor. Would I take them over the Lancers now? No way. Lancers are a BT unit. There are some good situations like Wood Elves where you want the heavy armor. But I want the extra damage. And the Sword and Board is just too slow damage output for me to really include. On to the ROR Heartseekers. These, I think, are solid B tier. If I want some big AP melee, you can definitely bring them out. I think they do struggle because I think the Pleasure Seekers almost do their job better because they're a lot more survivable. But these guys still hit like an absolute freight train, and that can be valuable in lots of situations. Now onto Pleasure Seekers. They are expensive, but there are lots of matchups where they absolutely dominate if you can call them out in the right time. I mean, I played a game the other day into Beastman, and they tore apart the Beastman army as soon as we got into the mid-game when he ran out of archers. And that is their value. They are incredible hammers. They're actually very tanky with regen and being multi-model, not a cav unit. And for that, I think they have to be an A tier unit. Furies of Slaanesh, AP on them is so massive. It means you can really fight armoured cav well, and that really can help the mobility game, especially when you have no AP Hellstriders. I only take 1 to 2 ever. I don't think you want to spam them out, but they're still Furies, so they can still dive really well, and for that, solid A tier unit. For Spawn, I think these sadly on Slaanesh are a CT unit. I don't think Spawn are that bad, but you look at Fiends, you look at Champions, you've got so much more you can do instead of Monstrous Infantry, and light armour is not something Slaanesh really wants to be leaning into, because you already have a lot of it, and they aren't filling a niche role that you need in anti-infantry killing power, because you've already got Slangors and Forsaken at mulch lightly armoured infantry. Moving on to Fiends, this unit should be in most builds. They are such good Moby still. They absolutely body other cav and are really hard to interact with due to their funny animations. Hasn't changed, still an ST unit. For regular champion, I think I struggle to include the second champion in. They're just expensive and you've got so many cool things. Why would I really bring it? I think there are cool builds where you bring like 2 champions, but I don't think the second one is as good as the first because the ROR is cracked. Being unbreakable, this unit I can play any matchup and send it into some horror fights just to tie stuff down and it'll come out the other side having paid for itself. And that is an amazing ability, just to be able to always get value consistently no matter what you send it into. I would take it in basically every matchup currently. They are the rock of the build and they really can just go big scary thing. I'll go fight that and let the infantry just domino through your opponent. Moving to the War Shrine. Big, slow Mortis Engine. It just looks worse than a Mask in my opinion. I think this actively hurts you because it really isn't contributing much other than a Mortis Engine. Slash doesn't really have the good spells to be able to trigger off to kill lots of stuff instantly. I don't really want to be fighting a small, slow ball. That's not how I want to play Slaanesh. Moving to the Pratons. These things I've seen are fine. They hunt monsters effectively, to a point, but it's Slaanesh. Do you really need help? I think I'll be generous, they're new, and give them C tier. If they came down in cost, Possibly. But your Slaanesh, you've got so many tools that can kill monsters and SEs. And do I really need a Praetor to do it? Not really. On to the keepers. I think it's similar. You've seen people make 2 or 3 keepers work, but they are still squishy, and their bound spells aren't amazing. The OR can be funny for Phantasmagoria, but as I've said earlier, it's a weird spell. I think it's probably a both C tier, but I don't think they're actually hurting you. If you want to do it in a matchup, some bullying with like double keeper and rampage, definitely can do it. And for that, they're solid. I think it's similar for Soul Grinder. SE hunting, SEs are always good. They might not be the best. You might often be like, why did I ever take them? And that's probably fair. But if you want to take them, I'm not sure any of these units are really hurting you. Now, regular chariots, you've got so many good units in Slaanesh, I think they just get overshadowed. Are they that bad of a unit? Not really, but would I just have something else? Yes. The ROR is expensive. I didn't really get much out of it, but is it the worst? No. And talking about the worst, these 4, they have struggled throughout the game's history. I would still not bring any of them. I think they're all D tier units. They just are so squishy. They don't do enough damage, and they're like 1500 gold. That's a fiend. That's a champion. If you're bringing these, you're actively making your build worse, in my opinion. And that finishes off my ranking of Slaanesh. As I said at the start of the video, if you do like this video, please like it. And if you do want to argue me, these are my opinions, so you're well within your right to question it. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'll see you in the next video.